European truck makers once owned the world. Volvo, Mercedes, Scania, these names were synonymous with reliability and quality. By the 90s, they controlled over 90% of their home market. Then something unexpected happened. Chinese manufacturers entered the game. Sinotruk, FAW, brands nobody had heard of 6 years ago. They started selling trucks 30% cheaper than European makers. Not just cheaper, different. Built for different markets, different regulations, different economics. And now European production lines are slowing down. Shifts are being cut. Industry leaders are openly terrified. As Chris Heron from e-Mobility Europe warned in late 2025, we have 1 or 2 years to stay ahead of this, or the Chinese will eat our lunch. But here's what makes this story shocking. This wasn't a surprise. Europe saw it coming and did almost nothing. So what really happened? Why did an industry that dominated for 70 years suddenly find itself on the verge of collapse? And what decision, or series of decisions, left Europe vulnerable to a threat they saw coming from a mile away? The story begins in the rubble of post-war Europe. In 1945, the continent's transportation infrastructure lay in ruins. Roads were destroyed, railways bombed, and the few remaining trucks were military surplus vehicles never designed for civilian freight. But European manufacturers saw opportunity in the chaos. Companies like Volvo in Sweden, founded in 1927, pivoted from making cars to building the heavy trucks Europe desperately needed for reconstruction. Volvo's breakthrough came with the L series in the 1950s. These trucks featured innovations that seem basic today, but were revolutionary then. Powerful diesel engines that could handle long hauls, cab designs that prioritized driver comfort, robust construction that could survive Europe's harsh winters and mountainous terrain. Scania, also Swedish, took a different approach. They focused on modular design, allowing customers to specify exactly the powertrain and configuration they needed. A single chassis could be configured for city delivery, long-haul freight, or construction work. Meanwhile, in Germany, Mercedes-Benz was building trucks that reflected German precision engineering. Their diesel engines were so reliable that European drivers began to trust them for international routes that could span several countries without reliable service networks. By the 1960s, European truck manufacturers had found their formula: superior engineering, driver-focused design, and build quality that justified premium prices. A European truck cost more than American alternatives, but it lasted longer and broke down less often. The 1970s marked the beginning of European dominance beyond their home continent. Volvo trucks appeared in construction sites across South America. Scania began manufacturing in Brazil to serve the growing Latin American market. Mercedes trucks hauled freight across Africa and the Middle East. But the real validation came when European trucks started succeeding in the most competitive market of all, North America. In the 1970s and 80s, Volvo and Scania established beachheads in the United States, competing against established American giants like Peterbilt, Kenworth, and Freightliner. European trucks offered something American vehicles couldn't match: advanced aerodynamics that improved fuel efficiency, comfortable sleeper cabs that made long-haul driving more bearable, and diesel engines that delivered both power and fuel economy. The 1980s brought technological breakthroughs that cemented European leadership. Turbocharging became standard, dramatically improving power-to-weight ratios. Advanced transmission systems gave drivers more control over fuel consumption, and electronic systems began appearing in European trucks years before they reached American models. Volvo introduced its F-Series in 1977, featuring a tilting cab that revolutionized truck maintenance. Instead of crawling underneath the vehicle to access the engine, mechanics could simply tilt the entire cab forward, exposing all major components. Scania's T-Series, launched in the 1980s, pushed cab design in a completely different direction. With its long nose and spacious interior, it looked more like an American truck, but retained European engineering standards. Mercedes responded with the SK series, which introduced electronic engine management systems that optimized performance automatically. These trucks could adjust fuel delivery, timing, and other parameters in real time, delivering better performance and lower emissions than anything else on the road. By the early 1990s, European manufacturers controlled their home market almost completely. Volvo, Mercedes, Scania, MAN, DAF, Iveco and Renault collectively held over 90% market share in European heavy truck sales. The reasons were clear. European trucks consistently outperformed alternatives in independent tests. The 1,000-point test, conducted annually by German trade magazines, saw Scania win multiple years running, often by significant margins over competitors. But dominance bred complacency. European manufacturers became focused on incremental improvements to existing designs rather than revolutionary changes. They assumed their technological leadership would continue indefinitely. The first cracks appeared in the early 2000s, though few people recognized them at the time. Asian manufacturers, particularly from South Korea and Japan, began developing heavy trucks that challenged European assumptions about build quality and pricing. Hyundai launched its Xciant series, offering capabilities similar to European trucks at prices 30% lower. Hino, Toyota's commercial vehicle division, introduced trucks with reliability metrics that approached European standards. But these early Asian competitors struggled with one critical weakness. They lacked the service networks and brand recognition needed to compete in European or North American markets. Buying a cheaper truck meant nothing if you couldn't get it serviced reliably. European manufacturers dismissed these early threats. After all, trucks weren't consumer electronics where buyers might gamble on an unknown brand. Fleet operators needed vehicles that would run reliably for 1 million kilometers or more. That kind of trust took decades to build. Besides, European trucks continued to lead in technological innovation. Volvo introduced the FH series in 1993, featuring radical aerodynamic improvements and driver amenities that set new industry standards. Mercedes launched the Actros in 1996, incorporating electronic systems that managed everything from fuel injection to transmission shifting. Even when Asian manufacturers gained footholds in developing markets, European companies weren't worried. Countries like Brazil, India, and Mexico represented future growth opportunities, but the real profits came from mature markets in Europe and North America. The 2008 financial crisis marked a turning point, though its full implications wouldn't become clear for another decade. European truck sales plummeted as freight demand collapsed. Manufacturing capacity that had seemed barely adequate suddenly became excessive. Companies responded by cutting costs aggressively. Research and development budgets were slashed. Long-term technology programs were postponed or cancelled. Workers were laid off or moved to part-time schedules. Meanwhile, China was implementing a completely different strategy. Rather than cutting back during the recession, Chinese manufacturers doubled down on expansion. Government subsidies kept factories running even when demand was weak. Research programs accelerated rather than slowing down. By 2010, Chinese truck manufacturers like Sinotruk, FAW and Dongfeng had become dominant forces in their home market. But more importantly, they had used the recession years to develop capabilities that would eventually threaten European leadership. The Chinese approach differed fundamentally from European traditions. Instead of pursuing incremental improvements to existing designs, Chinese manufacturers embraced rapid iteration and platform sharing. A single powertrain might appear in trucks, buses, and industrial equipment, spreading development costs across much higher volumes. Chinese companies also prioritized electrical systems and software integration from the beginning, while European manufacturers were retrofitting electronic systems onto mechanical designs developed decades earlier. Chinese trucks were being designed around electrical architectures. The breakthrough came with electric trucks. When European governments began mandating zero-emission zones in city centres, truck manufacturers scrambled to develop electric alternatives to their diesel models. But converting existing diesel truck designs to electric power proved incredibly challenging. The space occupied by engines, transmissions, and fuel systems had to accommodate batteries, electric motors, and cooling systems. Weight distribution changed dramatically. Range and payload capabilities suffered significantly. Chinese manufacturers faced the same challenges, but solved them differently. Instead of converting existing designs, they developed electric trucks from scratch. The results were vehicles optimized for electric powertrains rather than compromised by legacy mechanical systems. BYD launched its T-Series electric trucks in 2020. Offering range and payload capabilities that matched European electric trucks while pricing them 40% lower. The trucks featured rapid charging systems that could restore 80% capacity in 35 minutes. Sany introduced its electric truck line with modular battery systems that allowed fleet operators to configure range and payload according to specific applications. Need maximum range for long hauls. Install more batteries. Need maximum payload for urban delivery. Use fewer batteries and carry more freight. European manufacturers found themselves caught in a technological transition they hadn't anticipated. The shift to electric powertrains required completely different expertise. Battery chemistry, thermal management, and software integration became more important than traditional mechanical engineering. Worse yet, by 2025, Chinese electric trucks were capturing significant market share in European cities where zero-emission requirements made electric power mandatory. Belgian logistics company Gilbert Declercq placed orders for Chinese trucks specifically because they offered capabilities European alternatives couldn't match at prices European manufacturers couldn't compete with. As Philippe Declercq told Reuters, China's competitive advantage is their technology is about 3 years ahead of Europe's. The Chinese trucks offered 670-kilometre range with 35-minute charging times, performance that European electric trucks struggled to match. European manufacturers tried to respond, but they faced structural disadvantages that went beyond technology. European labour costs were multiples of Chinese levels. European environmental regulations added complexity and cost to manufacturing processes. European companies had to satisfy shareholders expecting consistent returns, while many Chinese competitors operated with government backing that prioritised market share over profitability. The situation deteriorated rapidly in 2025. Volvo announced production cuts as order intake fell significantly from the previous year. Daimler implemented short-time work schedules at its Worth plant. DAF reduced production from 260 trucks per day to 160 trucks per day by the end of the year. Market share data told the story starkly. European manufacturers still controlled over 97% of heavy truck sales as of 2024, but their grip was loosening. Chinese brands had captured only 0.02% of the Class 8 market above 15 metric tons gross vehicle weight, but their presence was growing rapidly in medium-duty segments. The days of European manufacturers controlling 90% of their home market are over. The future points to a bifurcated landscape. European trucks occupying premium tiers, while Chinese brands dominate price-sensitive applications. This shift offers a brutal lesson. Past success guarantees nothing when new paradigms emerge. To survive, legacy automakers must prioritize innovation and build tomorrow's capabilities rather than defending yesterday's advantages. While familiar names like Volvo and Mercedes will still roll down European highways, the era of unquestioned European dominance has ended. What emerges next depends entirely on how quickly these legacy titans can adapt to a world that changed faster than anyone expected.